Hello and welcome everyone. We are live right now on Cannabis, and if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great episode for you today. We are joined by Jennifer Bruce. We're going to be talking all about Ibogaine. It's a really exciting plant medicine that people are using to help them with addiction and all sorts of things. So we're going to be talking about that today. But before we get too far into it, let's give a shout out to our supporters. First off, shout out to the folks that can join us every single week. When we do these interviews, we live stream them out to our community. If you want to be a part of that members only community and support Cannabis and help keep us going, you can by searching Cannabis in the App Store, downloading our app, and using the code GROWERSLOVE for 50% off. Your support helps us keep going and helps us send out seeds and all sorts of things to our supporters every month. So thank you so much to those supporters. Also, shout out to Lost Coast Plant Therapy. I'm wearing my Lost Coast Plant Therapy shirt today in my hat. Thanks to lostcoastplanttherapy.com for supporting the show. If you need a spray to help you fight bugs on your plants, fighting powdery mildew, botrytis, things like that, check out Lost Coast Plant Therapy. You can order it on Amazon or buy it at your local grocery store. It's a super effective spray, and we recommend it and thank them for their support. Last shout out from my end before I throw it to JR, and then we'll get into the interview. We're going to shout out to SacredThreeMushrooms.com. We've had some great episodes lately about fungi, and if you are interested in growing fungi at home, search up SacredThreeMushrooms.com and also check out Fruity Spores. They've got grow kits and spores and all sorts of things that can help you get growing. So shout outs to them for their support. And then JR, I'm going to throw it over to you. Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
Thanks, Q. I appreciate that. First, I want to talk about Tiki and Neptune. They're both having big 420 sales on TikiSeeds.com and TikiCuts.com. And on the cut side, he's doing 50% off on his entire clone website, which is a really, really good opportunity. And I want to thank both of those guys for their support in the event we're doing, the OG Hempire Invitational here in Oregon. Cannabis was invited to have a booth. We're super stoked to be going. And Tiki has thrown down, and he's going to be buying Cannabis a booth. Literally the booth. And then all the other folks that are sponsors are going to be sending all kinds of free gear to give away. I'm going to be selling some of the Cannabis gear to raise money so that we could get to the next event. So come to the booth and show some support. We would love to get out and do these shows and get the word out to the people. It's nothing but a good time. Uncle Jim's going to be there. Sonny and Backtopia is going to come with us at the booth. And we're also going to have Jake the Ripper and myself. So come on out to the booth. It's at the OG Hempire Invitational tickets at Cheechable.com. Thanks, Q.
Yep. Well, let's get into our interview. So we have a great guest for you today. This is going to be a really interesting discussion for folks that are interested in plant medicine and how you can branch out into some new and exciting stuff that people are doing these days. So let's get into it. So our guest is Jennifer Bruce. She's been practicing plant medicines for quite some time. We're super excited to have her on the show. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So we like to start all of our interviews with folks just as a way to kind of get a background on you. How did you fall in love with the plant, or in this case, maybe it's Ibogaine, but just in general plant medicine? Be curious, like what was your journey that led you to kind of discovering this stuff, and then ultimately, obviously led you to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you. So it all began a long time ago. My hometown is Eugene, Oregon. So I grew up at the kind of tail end of the Grateful Dead scene, hit some shows with Jerry. And at a pretty young age, I started working in the cannabis industry. So I was in the cannabis industry like pretty much for 20 years, which eventually brought me to Humboldt County, where I live now. I was really active in the legalization process as a member of California Cannabis Voice. But up until that point, it'd been kind of like a crazy ride. I think a lot of us that ended up here in Humboldt had quite the story, and a lot of us were kind of trying to recreate like a different life than maybe we'd grown up with. A lot of us came from a lot of things. And, along the journey, it was so beautiful. And then there was some real dark points too, just kind of like life on steroids. But I had fallen into addiction during those years, like many of us had. My drug of choice was alcohol, but also like anything else y'all had, I would just like wash that down with my beers. And, had a real good time out in the hills of Humboldt for a really long time, but then it, kind of took over my life. And I got sober 13 years ago. I went through traditional like 12-step and that saved my life, but I was still in the cannabis industry. It got real stressful during the legalization process here in my community. And, it was really cool, but then there was like a lot of stress living in that world too. I think a lot of us were kind of dealing with like complex trauma. And so 3 years into my sobriety, I was still struggling with like anxiety, depression. I now know it wasn't like a medical condition. It was like unhealed trauma, right? And I also didn't know at the time, but because of the many years I'd spent around the cannabis farming, I had been exposed to botrytis, to powdery mildew, to black mold because we were having to live in a lot of old houses. The toxicity of the artificial lighting and the EMFs that come with that, the poor sleeping schedule, the inherent stress of that line of work, et cetera. So I also was like struggling with chronic illness. I had fatigue, I had joint pain and all kinds of stuff. And, I come to find out later that the depression, anxiety can also be related to those exposures. So before I went the pharmaceutical route, because I was just burnt out 3 years sober, I just won state championship for my cannabis edibles line. And my career was at the highest point it had ever been. I was getting featured in High Times magazine and I just couldn't handle it anymore. I also had a 2-year-old daughter and I'd seen a few friends of mine go down for Ibogaine and come back like totally different people down to Mexico. So I did that as a last ditch effort and it changed my life. I came home, I retired from the cannabis industry and I've been working in the latest third wave of the more therapeutic model of psychedelics ever since, helping people get through addiction, trauma, chronic illness, mental health challenges, you name it.
It's really cool. Yeah, I was to prepare for this interview, I just searched Ibogaine on YouTube and I found the Today Show just did a story about it. And they had a doctor, a scientist from Ohio State that was talking about it. So it was just so cool to see that the discussion is going nationwide at this point, where people are really talking about how impactful this can be. So I'm excited to get into it.
And I'm
Go ahead.
I'm kind of curious about your journey to Mexico. Obviously that's not something that you do, just lightheartedly. That probably took a huge amount of commitment. Can you talk about kind of how you came to that moment and that process?
Yeah, well, there's the gift of desperation, and there's always the biggest medicine I think anybody can experience is pain and suffering, right? Because you have to get to this point where the discomfort is great enough that you're willing to step outside your comfort zone. And I think all of us humans like to be comfortable, right? So like I said, I just had kind of hit a wall and I'd seen the problems with the pharmaceuticals and the side effects. And so, yeah, going to Mexico is a huge commitment. It was really scary. I was having to leave my business behind. With Ibogaine, if it's not done safely, it's potentially fatal, which is the difference between all other entheogenic medicines, is that Ibogaine and Iboga, if not used properly, which this is a big problem because it's not regulated, but if done safely, it's okay, can potentially be fatal. And at that point, I had a 2-year-old little girl. And then I was also in a traditional 12-step recovery model where, there's a perceived idea of what abstinence is. And that was considered to be a mind-altering substance. We're changing the narrative here. There's difference between drugs and medicine, right? But I was also risking being ostracized from my recovery community, which had saved my life a few years ago. So yeah, it was a big leap. Also, I had never been to Mexico before, and all you see on the news is cartel and it's dangerous. So I got down there. It's totally not true. Like, I think it's more dangerous up here some neighborhoods where I live. So yeah, it was a big deal for me to go down to Mexico at that point in my life. Mm-hmm.
Very
So
good.
how is Ibogaine and can you kind of explain, you'd mentioned the Iboga, right?
Yeah.
The other,
Yeah.
can you explain the difference and kind of like how it's collected and prepared, or how you would maybe go about growing it?
Yeah. So Ibogaine is a Western medicine. It is derived, it's one of the active compounds in the Iboga plant. Also, you can find it in Baconga, which grows wild all over Mexico, and a couple other plants. But originally it was discovered and derived from root bark named Iboga, or it's the plant's Iboga. That's from Gabon, Africa. And that's been traditionally used there, arguably since the beginning of humanity. The story over there goes is it's kind of what helped humans become human. They take the Old Testament of the Bible because they were colonized, but like a lot of the oral stories tell how that's the tree of life, and that's kind of what sparked humanity, because that's where humans come from according to science. And so that is a plant that grows everywhere in the jungle there. And the bark taken by itself, very powerful plant medicine. So the ibogaine has been taken out of that. It's much stronger. And in the late 1970s, there was a man named Howard Lotsof. I think he was 18 at the time, from Europe, and he was opiate dependent. He'd taken that as a recreational substance, but then he woke up after, he came out of the experience completely free of withdrawals, no cravings. And then we discovered from there that it has very powerful anti-addictive qualities to it, which is certainly not the only or highest ability of that medicine, but it's what it's becoming known for here in the West. Yeah.
Well, let's get into kind of how you can use this to help you with your health or various issues with health. So, in what ways is Ibogaine believed to be impactful on the physiological side of your health?
Yeah, so the attention that it's getting in the media over here, and what a lot of advocates speak about, is its ability to get people through opiate withdrawals, or opiate detox without the withdrawals, and that's good and bad, which I can unpack if you'd like. But we know that it's really good for trauma. I was privileged enough to work on some of the pilot projects for the veterans that we're going through, and some of my clients were, had been at the Mayo Clinic, which is like one of the top medical facilities available, with no progress at all in 10 years. And then they go in for Ibogaine sessions and they come out, free from a lot of the trauma and the PTSD and that kind of a thing. It's a root medicine. If you're going back to Iboga, it's a root. So it gets down to the root. I also discovered on my own, but, it was really good for getting the mold out of the system, which can be very challenging. Mold sickness is like really, really crazy. But we know it's antiviral. So I know people that have provided Ibogaine over the years that, people were coming in, some of them had like Hep C or HIV, because inherently with the IV drug use, and after treatment, the viral load was either way down. I know people that have gotten rid of Hep C completely with Ibogaine. It can be really helpful for autoimmune. It can be really helpful for depression, anxiety. It cleans the gut out, digestive disorders, but the gut and the brain aren't even connected. It's one big unit. We have our main nervous system, the enteric nervous system's in the gut. So like 95% of our serotonin is actually produced and utilized in our gut, not our brains. So the Iboga has this incredible intelligence, and it's not getting spoken about a lot yet, but it understands like these kinds of conditions so well, understands that the whole mind body system needs to be cleaned, healed, and reset. So that's how I believe we're seeing these miraculous outcomes sometimes. So we're really just scratching the surface, but, people that have gone through for, addiction treatment will, it's not always either. It's different for everybody, but, what everybody hopes for are these ideal outcomes where you really do feel reset to pre-addicted state. And it's
Yeah.
really, yeah, just lastly with that, it's important to like, realize too that with addiction, it's not the substance that's the problem, that's the medicine. So there's the underlying unhealed trauma, the anxiety, the depression, the fear, the social isolation, the physical illness. These are all nervous system related disorders that are triggered by either personal or generational trauma. And so the Ibogaine can get down there and like really do some magical things, body, mind, and spirit. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, the news segment that I watched earlier, some bits that I thought were interesting. So it was saying that when people go through traditional addiction treatment, roughly like 20% of people don't relapse. So meaning like 80% of people do relapse. So with Ibogaine, they said that bumps up to 30%. So even though it's not it's not 100 or whatever it is, it's still a meaningful improvement over any other addiction treatments that are out there. I thought that was interesting. And then they also said that on the science side that they think that they don't really know how it works too much, but they said they think it was like resetting your their like reward center in your brain, right? That kind of gets out of whack when you're addicted to various things. So I thought that was pretty interesting that it's still obviously on the science side, we're still trying to understand it, but we kind of understand this, at least this one piece of it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think, I mean, there's definitely better outcomes from Ibogaine than traditional treatment, but what we're still missing the point. See, I've been integrating people going to clinics all over the world for Ibogaine for almost a decade now. So I've gotten to work with a lot of people. And the issue though is, and it's just our Western mindset is we're still like, oh, we're just going to go take a pill for an ill and Ibogaine is the cure. And I can assure you that the relapse rates after Ibogaine are just about the same as any other, because I've worked in the traditional addiction recovery. You feel so much better. And then the problem with Ibogaine is that you think that you don't need to continue to do your recovery work.
Yes.
And you do.
There you go.
It doesn't have to be
very
12
good.
step.
Very good.
It doesn't have to be 12 step.
No.
But you got to get on some kind of a path, whether it be yoga or it's because like with Ibogaine, the invitation here is to get out of the whole Western model and be like, I'm sick, I'm broken, I have a disease, and be like, actually, I, might have been born into this life. Every difficult situation that I've been through is actually given to me to learn and grow. And this is an initiation into an elevated, more spiritual path in life. I have to take better care of my body. I have to go clean up the messes I've made so I don't live in fear, guilt, and shame. And I got to kind of cultivate my character and show up in the world, because if I want life to bring me certain things, I got to, it's not like I'm going to go do Ibogaine and then I get to have a good life or anything else. It's like a grower, right? Like if I want to be a prize winning grower, I can go bribe the judges at the cups, but I'm going to feel good about it. Like when I got up on my podium and got first place in California, I did it because I asked myself, who do I have to become to receive this? And so we come out of Ibogaine, it resets us. It will give us some insights. It will really help us to feel better. But there's this window after Ibogaine. Ibogaine turns into noribogaine. That's kind of like a antidepressant that gets time released in the liver, and you get a little Challen master in your brain keeping your thinking correct, because we don't really have a drinking or drug problem. We got a thinking problem. And it's how I show up to life.
Right.
Showing up, what do I have to offer rather than what can I take from others and everything. And so what we do with this window after Ibogaine, which can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months, depending on how we take care of ourselves, including cleaning up our diet, all of these kinds of things. Am I going to get exercise? Am I getting out in nature? How's my sleep? All this stuff really matters. Then I can take this period of time and radically change my life, because it's the way I was living my life that made me need to take drugs to hide and escape to begin with. So this is a warrior's path, and it's an initiation. And it's like, what am I going to do with this this interruption of my addiction, right? So
Yeah.
I don't, when the media is like, oh, it's got a better result, because it's still selling this idea that with something of this nature that's so complex that we'll never understand it.
Yeah.
That like, oh, I'm just gonna go do this 7-day thing and come home and then I'm cured from my addiction. I just want to clarify that the relapse rates depend on if people take this and run with it or not.
Yeah.
I
No,
kind
I
of
appreciate that.
want to chime in on that a little bit because, something that was explained to me that really helped me with my recovery process was there's a very distinct difference between physical dependency and addiction. The physical dependency side of most things, you can work down to a level where you can just jump off and exit. Where the addiction part of things, that's the stuff you carry with you, and that's the baggage and the work that you're talking about. And then until you address those issues, you'll just shift one for the other. You know what I mean? You may drop this, but you might pick up that. It may be healthy. You might obsess about it in a weird way. But at the same time, I feel like if you don't do that work on the addiction side of things, you're not going to, like you said, have the kind of results that people are longing for. And we find with addiction, you could probably speak to this, is that you don't always get it the first time you're up to bat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to go to bat several times before you hit that home run and you're over the fence and you're free. And so if you could kind of speak to that a little bit, Jen, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this isn't a one-time thing. This is like, it's like relapse. There's so much medicine in that, again, like a little bit more suffering, because that just shows me like I wasn't totally done. I still have some idea that there's something left there for me. So you have to go back and really close that door so relapses can serve that purpose, right? If we're lucky enough to survive them. And then I also believe, like, I was in 12-step and stuff, and you pick up something and then you go back and you are totally starting over again. And it's not really the case, because the sign that you're in recovery doesn't mean that you never fuck up again. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but like,
no, go ahead.
You fall off the horse, you get back on again. And a big part of the recovery process is even realizing that there's a horse to get on. Like, I was so grateful my first recovery meeting I went to, because I was like, oh my gosh, like other people are struggling with this and there's something I can do about it. Like, that was the biggest gift I've ever had in my life. Did I do it perfectly? No, and this idea that you have to do it perfectly. That's I think one of the things that's holding the recovery community back from more progress is this idea that, I have to, if I'm sober, that means I have to be perfect. I can't be struggling with depression. I can't be struggling with anxiety. I can't have unhealed trauma, then we're told like, how we take care of our physical vessel, this meat sack where the spirit's in, doesn't matter. It's like, it's kind of ridiculous. So relapse is definitely a part of the process for a lot of people. And you just keep coming back to whatever it is that you're doing. And finally, one of the times you just got to get up one more time, then you fall down, and then that's success. You're not going to expect a toddler to you're not going to let them fall down and be like, haha, you got the chance to walk and now you're screwed the rest of your life. No, you help the little person get up. And that's why it's so important to have community and to have a structure. And that's with like Ibogaine, as we evolve this over the years, like, we need some kind of a path, a teacher, and a community of some kind, because ultimately, at least for myself in addiction, like I had no idea how to live life in a way that didn't have like tremendous consequences. I needed to kind of go through school. My family was this way. I was not taught how to navigate through life in a way with a little bit more ease and grace.
I think you touched on a couple things too about finding a community that's healthy for you and serving that community. Like, back when I did recovery, it was still the old traditional, you had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because there was nothing else. And so the thing that got me my ass in the chair was I volunteered to make the coffee. And I'm a people pleaser. And so the idea that I would fuck up and these people would not get their coffee weighed heavy on my heart. So I got my ass in the chair and I started listening to things that started making sense in my head. Yeah, they were talking about alcohol and I was dealing with something else, but the message kind of rang true, and I had to separate myself from the whole gaudy type, that, kind of Christian aspect that they were. Because back in the day, all the meetings were in the churches, down in the basement of some church, And so there was a lot of that was kind of being pushed in that direction. So I didn't really find a full vibe there that spoke to me, but I got enough out of it that I could start doing the work. And that was the thing that made the difference.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Absolutely. Take the best and leave the rest, And,
I
and
like
it's not
that.
about God. If you go back into the spiritual appendix, it says our members have had personality change sufficient enough to overcome our addiction. There, you don't have to be perfect. I just need to change enough. I'm not killing myself for other people.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's not much to ask. And then it says, it says, that's what their definition of the spiritual experience is, just a personality change sufficient enough to stop killing myself. And then it says, there's some greater picture than us, whatever makes the cannabis so beautiful, that thing. And then it says, our more religious members call that God. So it doesn't even say anything about God,
Right. Yeah.
So I can buy into that, but
yeah. And so now I kind of want to move forward with some of the other impactful things that I think kind of create that bigger picture that you've been talking about, that kind of leads us to a reset, and one of them is sleep patterns. I know so many people in my life that have gotten on those sleep med trains, and man, they're a trap, because when they stop working for you, you have to take more. And then when they stop working for you or you can't get them, the outcome is you don't sleep. And so not sleeping can make you go mad. And so can you kind of talk about how it affects sleep patterns and how it can maybe help reset those for folks?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the mistakes people make with Ibogaine integration is that, so these plant medicines and the derivatives are extremely intelligent. And so, I think it's more important to notice the cycles of your body and how your rhythm's being reset. So many people spend all this time with their integration coach trying to figure out what the mystic at the base of the pyramid they saw in their vision was trying to say. I don't think that shit matters all that much.
Right.
Notice what your body's doing and the syncing upness, because the biggest problem we have in today's world and why we see mental health and addiction on the rise so much is that we're completely out of sync with nature. And so our circadian rhythm, that dopamine pathway, the reward system, that's serotonin, it's GABA, it's endorphins, which are our natural opiates. They all work in chorus to eventually drop a dopamine molecule, which is responsible for our sense of reward. That's why it's called the reward system. That's the pleasure center of our nervous system. And so the most important thing about that, even if we're taking antidepressants or even go to do Ibogaine, and have all the nutrients we need in our body to build those molecules, because most of us are severely nutrient deplete in this world today with the poor food that we have. But anywho, our eyes and the retinas have receptors that read what time of day it is, determined by the wavelengths that the sun is putting out. And that changes from sunrise is going to be different than 4 p.m. And so the reason the yogis have been sun gazing and Surya Namaskara, the sun worship, at the sunrise is because we're literally setting our dopamine system, our reward system, to the time of day that it is. So in the morning, we get dopamine, we go into serotonin in the afternoon. And then in order to go to sleep, we need melatonin, which is what serotonin turns into. And so when we come into Ibogaine, one of the biggest mistakes people don't understand is that at the beginning, if you need a reset, sometimes we don't need very much sleep for a couple weeks or a couple months, and people panic. And unfortunately, all these Ibogaine clinics and the providers are even recommending, take a sleeping pill. It's no, don't do that. I always ask my clients, I can't sleep right now. It's been a couple of weeks and I'm only getting a couple hours a night. I'm are you tired? They're no. And I'm well, then why are you tripping? Let your body readjust. And eventually what will happen is you'll start to fall into better sleep patterns if you know how to do it. The most important thing for getting a good night's sleep is getting up and getting early morning sunlight on your face with no sunglasses, no hat, no sunblock for at least 10 minutes. 30 is ideal. If you do that in the morning, your body's going to know what time it is, and then you're going to get to nighttime and be tired as long as you're not chugging like energy drinks all day, right? So the Ibogaine knows all this stuff, but then people get home and don't know how to work with it. If you're patient and know a little bit about your circadian rhythm, clean up your sleep hygiene too, because most of us don't have good sleep hygiene, your sleep's going to come back. And I can't emphasize how important this is, because if we've been taking sleep pills like I was doing, or drinking, or even like smoking weed till we pass out, we're not getting this restorative sleep that our body needs when it goes naturally. And genetically, we are all designed to heal. That's why my business is called Humans Can Heal. We're designed to heal and restore and stay healthy if the conditions are right. Now, at a cellular genetic level, the restoration process that happens every single night, cell by cell, happens only if we're in deep REM sleep. If, for me, I was anesthetizing myself with booze and everything else for 17 years. Like, I missed 17 years of good sleep. So if you go in for Ibogaine, it's going to take a little while for all of this to catch up. So you got to be patient, right?
Well, people say that with certain therapies that there's the onset of the experience, and then there's those therapeutic values that kind of bleed out over time as you continue. And I want to shout out to Tam Integration.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful man, and I follow him on Instagram. And sometimes when I try to talk about that guy, it chokes me up, because I was going through a really hard kind of time, mentally, with my own mental health. And his words really helped me navigate. And then, like I said, once I started microdosing, a lot of that stuff got reset. And I'm not this kind of scattered person that I used to be. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of the cognitive functions and what we can gain, like, over time as our experience kind of bleeds out, some of those reparative type cognitive goodies that we kind of gleaned from the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Daniel Shankin's awesome. I knew him back in the day in my hometown. Yeah. Beautiful work in the world he's doing. Yeah. So, I mean, we know that there's with microdosing, it's kind of like continuously supporting the body's ability for neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, meaning that our brain can like create new pathways. We can learn more easily. We can change our behaviors more easily. Microdosing is really powerful. It's not like going in for an Ibogaine flood. We mostly say, like, with microdosing, it's like you still have to pedal the bike, but it's like you have an electric bike, right? And so in the larger sessions with other plant medicines, bigger journeys, we call that the critical window afterwards. Like with Ibogaine, it would be Ibogaine, but it continues to support the nervous system in incredible ways. And you can look under the microscope now and see what, this neuroplasticity looks like. So it's what we do with this time, like you got it, because you're like, oh, I'm noticing that it's resetting me. So we got to work with that and do, show up and do the effort. If it's trying to reset us, but I'm still doing all the stuff that's been keeping me sick, it's not really going to be able to get me to the other side of everything. Right. So it's about tuning in and really noticing these things. And, if you notice something that shifted for you and you're feeling better, look it up online and research it a little bit. This is a learning process for sure. But I mean, the plant medicines are so intelligent. And again, it's the resetting of all of these things that are what heals,
Right.
Yeah.
So we were, for this next section of the interview, we were going to talk about the impact or how you can use this to treat mental health issues. But before we get into that specific question, I was also hoping, because I don't know if we really talked about the actual treatment itself and like what it's like. We've just could you talk about that? Because like literally don't even know. Are we talking about like, is it a multi-day experience? Is it like, just kind of help me understand or help us understand what's an Ibogaine like treatment look like? And then let's also talk about a lot of the things that you've been already discussing about the importance of working this into kind of treating the trauma that you might have or other, mental health issues. So yeah, let's start with what's the treatment like?
So Ibogaine and Iboga are going to look a little bit different. Ibogaine is more of a Western medicine. So typically right now at a typical Ibogaine clinic, like down in Mexico, it's going to be 7-day treatment, which I don't think is enough time. If you have the ability to find somewhere that's 14 days or longer, I highly recommend it. 7 days, I don't think is really long enough to process. So make sure if you can only make it to a 7-day place to have something lined up afterwards that's peaceful and conducive to continuing to heal. But before you go, you need a medical screening. Again, Ibogaine can be fatal. So you need to have an EKG done. There's some rare genetic issues and other issues with the heart that you need to be screened for. You need to have a kidney, a renal panel. It can be, hard on that system. Also the liver. They should be asking for basic blood work, checking your electrolytes, these kinds of things. And disclaimer, like I'm just saying in general, like don't go by this, do your own research. But that should be done and complete and have all lab tests back and clear before you go down. You want to really do a lot of preparation work in your life before you go down, because you're going to probably have some radical changes and you need to be able to come home to a place that's conducive, even down to like cleaning your house, getting the bills paid, insulating yourself from toxic relationships when you return home. If your job's really stressful, it's not going to be any less stressful when you come home. You're going to need some time. And that's where you want to work with a coach. Really, like if you haven't done this before, you need to get coaching. Some of the clinics offer it, even the ones that do, it's only a couple of sessions. You really need a few months with a coach with this. I can't emphasize that enough. Integration is so important. Then you go down, you're all clear, hydrated, all the things. And so usually you'll get there. Some of them will give a little bit of test doses at a lower amount. If you show up and anything seems off or not safe or weird, then listen to yourself, but don't do it, because there's a lot of problems in the Ibogaine scene. There's a lot of shady clinics, a lot of shady providers. So you got to really be careful. I cannot emphasize that enough either. It's the Wild West, and that's not something you want to be riding a bucking horse doing. You want to be in a good, safe place. So do your research on that. Show up. Everything should feel good. There should be some medical staff on site, and then you just kind of get into it. But then once you go through the process, Ibogaine is probably the most powerful psychedelic on the planet. It is unlike any other psychedelic that you've ever taken. Really important to be 100% honest with your providers. If you have been taking any substances, even supplements, you don't want to hide them because they can potentially be fatal. Most of the fatalities you hear about with Ibogaine are because the patient ingested something and did not tell their providers, especially like opiates, because once you get down to Mexico, you can go to the pharmacia real easy. Alcohol and benzodiazepines are really dangerous to mix. So just know that. Then you go into the journey though, and it's so physical. Sometimes you get crazy visions. Some people don't get any visions at all. So like the most important thing is to go in with an intention rather than an expectation, because everybody's journey is different. And depending on the level of toxicity, like if we've been using for 20 years or something with opiates or whatever, like we may have a very physical experience, lots of purging, these kinds of things. And that's all really good. The medicine knows what you need. If you're going in, like, I went in 3 years sober, yogi, very clean diet, all this stuff. I purged once for 5 minutes and the rest of it was emotional, spiritual. So, depending on where you're at is going to determine kind of your journey. And then the journeys can last anywhere from, the peak of them can be like 8 to 12 hours, very intense. In my Ibogaine journey, it was so intense, it kind of anesthetizes your body, and then you can't even walk. Like if you have to get up to the bathroom, you need two people helping you because you have to just shuffle your feet because it kind of puts you under. You can really feel it working on your body, scrubbing out your organs, scrubbing out your brain. People will say it's like a African car wash or like scrubbing bubbles just going all through your body, and it will know where it needs to go to do the work, and you can feel it. Clean out the lungs if you've been smoking. It's just, you feel like you have new lungs afterwards. It's crazy. So it will work like that. And then if you get the visions, the third eye opens, and then, it's kind of Acme style. Like it doesn't bring you on these crazy astral journeys like ayahuasca can. It's a root. So it's usually more like really simple and to the point, and like little clouds and like a few words or one vision. But then, you'll have a chance to sometimes like review and renegotiate past traumas, things like this. Maybe we've been assholes, maybe something bad happened to us, but it gives us this like ability to look at everything without an emotional charge so that we can actually like work through it sometimes. And that's another unique quality about this medicine. And then the visuals are not fractal and, LSD kind of style. It's these like sheaths of reality of like light. It's hard to explain unless you've taken it. It's very unlike anything else. Then
So it's not like a 5-MeO type thing, and the duration 12 hours. I mean, that's a hell of a commitment. Now, like with 5-MeO, it's like what, like a 20-minute deal. Can you kind of tell a little bit difference between those kind of classifications of psychoactives, like psilocybin and that, and the difference in iboga and what it brings to the table in like an entourage kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not like anything else. It just, I've tried to like compare it, but you just can't. It's considered grandfather of all the plant medicines. And the peak can be like 5 hours too. And if you're going through iboga, it's going to be less medicine and less intense, but then and the peak of it might be 4 hours. It depends on the dosing that you take, right? And then the other unique thing in comparison to like 5-MeO, where you just get shot up and come back down, poof, which isn't safe for everybody, by the way. It's the aftermath of the peak experience. So you come out of it, but you're still really in the space for a whole nother day. Usually they'll give it to you at night, all the way you come out of the peak of it in the morning, and then the whole next day you're up, but it's very raw. They call it the gray out day. That can be the most difficult part of the journey because you're processing all of the emotions and you have to sit with it. It can be pretty rugged, but then you sleep at some point, usually the next night, even if it's just for an hour or two. And then after you wake up, that's where people feel the reset. I felt like I'd gotten a completely brand new body, mind, and spirit, like I was a baby again, but it was like 2 days later. So it's a commitment. And I wish I could like compare it to the other medicines, but it's just not able to be compared.
Well, I think it's really interesting the way that it reacts on our physiology, not just our psychology. I think that like the antiviral properties and those kind of things are very interesting. So, what are like what is our legal scene like in the United States, and why are we not just growing it ourselves and making it available like we do everything else we make available? Is it because it's so powerful and specialized?
I mean, people could say different things. I mean, we're changing the laws right now. I'm a founding member of Decriminalized Nature here in Humboldt County. We've decriminalized Arcata and Eureka. There's trials going on in Kentucky right now.
That's what I heard. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend that's involved in that. And it's Schedule 1, but it's totally obsolete if you were to take that to the Supreme Court, because there's scientific research now and clinical evidence showing that it does have medical value and that it's actually anti-addictive. It has no potential for, nobody wants like, oh, that was fun, I'm going to go do it again. I love the medicine. I sit with it regularly because I love it. But at the beginning, I never want to go through a flood again. I would if I needed to. I still sit, but it's not like, oh, what are you doing on Saturday night? I'm going to go blow my mind out on Ibogaine. Like, it's not going to happen. So I believe that the medicine will come when it wants to, and that any of us that are involved in that's because the medicine has chosen us, and we are only there as stewards. Same the way I felt about cannabis.
That's how I feel about cannabis. It chose me, and I microdose RSO, and I microdose psilocybin. Is microdosing Ibogaine ever a thing, or is it just that, that experience?
Oh man, Ibogaine or Iboga microdosing is amazing. Most people that I know who haven't done the initiatory larger dose, though, don't get the benefit from Iboga. And that can actually be very difficult because it brings up so much of the trauma, so much of it really makes you look at yourself. And if you're not prepared for that or haven't gotten the bulk of that taken out with a larger dose, it can be difficult. That's not for everybody. But what I've noticed for myself and other people is after you go through Iboga root bark ceremony, or maybe, arguably Ibogaine flood, because some people say it has nothing to do with Iboga because it's been westernized. But, after those of us that have gone through these larger sessions, the microdosing can be amazing, especially if you're dealing with chronic illness, because stress is the trigger. And if you start to feel a little off, you can take this minute little amount and then you're connecting back with that frequency, and it's incredible what you can do. But again, even with microdosing, you need to make sure your heart's good. You need to really be guided through that process, because it's not like psilocybin. Like, you need to put your intention into this medicine and take the microdosing really seriously, because if you don't, and you don't do what it tells or shows you, it's going to take you down to your knees. It's kind of will spank you, so it can be really great, but it's a skilled process that you need to know what you're doing.
Makes sense.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The way you've been talking about it, it's basically, it sounds like after treatment, you're given this opportunity to, get past or get through various things, but you need to take advantage of that opportunity. Could you talk about how folks can best take advantage of that opportunity, so to speak, to treat their mental health? Like you've mentioned, you kind of have to face a lot of these traumas. How can someone make sure that they kind of get through that in the best way?
Yeah. So integration. So we say in the psychedelic field, like 20% of the work is the journey and 80% is in Mount Tam integration. Will back me up on this. 80% is the integration. That's how we take what we experience and apply it to our life for lasting change. So if you're new to the path, or not even new, like I have an integration coach still, right? And that's what I've been doing for 10 years. But having a skilled guide or coach for integration where you meet regularly is really important. Now, the whole field is flooded with psychedelic integration coaches now because it's like popular, but you need to make sure that you have somebody that's really highly skilled, has experience, understands Iboga, Ibogaine, because it's different than the other medicines, and then also might specialize in the area that you're working to heal. Like if you identify as somebody who is recovering from addiction, then I would want to pick a coach that's been through addiction themselves, because I haven't seen any qualification. Like I'm trained in addiction, but like my training was the fact that I went through it, and there's no certification course, there's no college degree, although you do need those things too. Most of the time you need to be trained in psychedelics, but then you also need to really deeply understand the addiction recovery process. Or if you understand that you're identifying as healing from really serious trauma, then you need to have a psychedelic integration coach that's trained in things like somatic therapy. Because a regular therapist.
What's that? Sorry.
So somatic experiencing, and this is like Peter Levine, Dr. Gabor Mate, but so I wanted to get back to, because you're like, oh, mental health. So when we come onto the medicine path, what we first need to do, and I do, is educate people, and we need to what's called trauma inform our experience. Because if we recognize that we've been through some stuff in our life, or maybe our ancestors have been, because we now know it gets passed down genetically, but we can change our genes. We need to understand the nervous system and what fight, flight, freeze, and fawn look like. And so if you do that, 80% of the diagnosis in the psychiatric manual, the DSM-5, are obsolete because it's symptoms of nervous system dysregulation. And so something like somatic therapy, if you work with a skilled person in this, we drop down into the body to heal the nervous system. And then when we regulate and heal the nervous system, which the brain is part of, the mental health will naturally get better, because our mental health was responding to the fact that we were in real or perceived threat. So if I'm in fight or flight, I'm going to be angry, irritable, and unable to concentrate, all kinds of physical immune symptoms, this kind of a thing. Well, do I have anger disorder? Do I have anxiety disorder? Or am I in my sacred stress response that I was born with to keep me safe from real or perceived danger? And we need to heal that, so that then my thinking can go back into how it is when I'm not in real or perceived danger. And so with the somatic coach, like, another thing I've seen with Ibogaine is like, yeah, it's really good for resetting, healing trauma, but it doesn't really necessarily get rid of the fact that now we're hypersensitized to stress moving forward. Our nervous system is depleted, and that I go back to life, which is inherently stressful and traumatic in today's world. Do I have the resiliency and the skill set to keep healing myself in real time so that I don't get triggered and go back and stay there?
I think that's huge. I think that's huge, because when we wake up today, we have the choices we make today. And all the impact of our past is what lead up to the choices a lot of times that we make. And if we're making it out of fear, and I'm just going to say it, I don't care who the fuck you are. Desperate people do desperate things. And if you can't recognize that, and you can't help lift somebody up who needs to be lifted up, then you yourself need some help, because we got to start helping our brothers and sisters who are sitting on these streets suffering, right? And so we make our efforts and we get punished and we get penalized. But at the end of the day, we keep fighting and we keep healing and we keep helping. And that's our mission until the day I die. And so I just hope that more people get these words out, because we are fortunately in an age of misinformation, but we are also, unfortunately, we're in an age of misinformation, but at the same time, we have the ability to share healing information. And if we plug into the right channels and we plug into the right communities, we can navigate all this madness that's around us, and our words create our reality every day. So if we get up and we make those choices to serve, I serve love. At the end of the day, that's the energy that gets me through my family, my career, everything. That's the energy, my plant, my garden. That's my focus. So if we can center ourselves in that and get through some of that stuff that we've all just been talking about, I think that we're all going to help each other up and get us out of this madness. Sorry.
No, it's all good, man. I appreciate it. It's definitely stirred up some interesting things in my my dad was an alcoholic, and he didn't survive his addiction. So this has been a really interesting discussion for me as well. I'd love for you to give, Jen, I'd love for you to give us some shout outs in terms of where can people learn more about you and your company you were talking about earlier. And how can they connect with you and just learn more about what you've been talking about?
Yeah, thank you. So they can find me. I'm Jen Bruce, and it's humanscanheal.com. And I just teach people how to create a lifestyle where their natural ability to heal can be activated. And, Instagram's at humans.heal or humans.can.heal. And pretty soon I'm going to be opening up a monthly membership site where there's going to be nutrition, educations, and tools for psychedelic preparation and integration. It's going to be lifestyle medicine. It's going to be Kundalini yoga, another super powerful technique and ancient wisdom for healing in today's times. And so you can hit me up over there. And then I wanted to also say too, like if anybody's listening in here that's like in traditional recovery and's been scared to cross over, there's a lot of really progressive communities. Like there's a lot of free stuff. Like there's psychedelics and recovery meetings online right now, almost I think every day and in person in some towns. And those are 12-step based recovery meetings for people that are finding benefit in psychedelics. So, I have a whole bunch of free resource lists that I can give out. You don't need a bunch of money to get on this path. There's things that you can do right now. So.
Yeah, and I was excited you mentioned decriminalized nature. We've actually had decriminalized nature on the show a couple times. So if other folks are watching this and they're like, what's that? And they want to learn more about it, we've just searched Cannabis Decriminalized Nature. You should find a couple episodes that we've done there. Well, this has been a really great episode, really great discussion with you, Jenna. I really appreciate your time hanging out with us on this Sunday afternoon in April. JR, did you have any other questions that we wanted to get to before we kind of sign off for the day?
I just want to thank you for your time and your generosity, and thanks for coming on and sharing your story. I mean, part of our journey is vulnerability, and for you to come on and share that with everyone, I think was obviously powerful to me. And so I can't thank you enough for coming on. And I want to stay in touch. I want to know how things unfold, because for a lot of our plant medicines, they're becoming exit drug. I hate to say that, but they're becoming exit drugs and exit therapy. I like that better. They're becoming exit therapy. And so I would like to continue that conversation, and please, if you would come back on, we'd greatly appreciate it, Jen.
Oh, love to. We gotta lift each other up, man. Education is the first step.
That's so awesome. Well, if you've liked the show, please like us on YouTube, or if you listen to podcasts and you'd rather listen to episodes like this, search on Spotify. You'll find this episode on Spotify or any podcast app. You'll be able to find it. So that'll be out there and help get this information, or you can share it with a friend that way. But thank you so much, Jen. We really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone who's watching. And as always, JR,
Growers love.
Mm-hmm.